Fulop, another Democrat who refused to endorse Governor Christie. The next day, Mayor Sokolich texted Bill Baroni, Christie's top man at the Port Authority, describing his problems in his town. 4 busy lanes of traffic merging into only one toll booth. Help, please. It's maddening. A week later, the mayor emails Baroni asking for a private meeting to dispel rumors he's heard that the closures were political punishment aimed at him. Baroni shares that information with Wildstein, who in turn shares it with Governor Christie's campaign manager, Bill Stepien, writing that it will be a tough November for this little Serbian, referring to the mayor, who is actually of Croatian heritage. Stepien's emailed response, "It's fine. The mayor is an idiot, though." So what does Governor Christie think about all that? Late today, the governor issued a statement. Here's a quote. "What I've seen today for the first time is unacceptable. I am outraged and deeply saddened to learn that not only was I misled by a member of my staff, but this completely inappropriate and unsanctioned conduct was made without my knowledge. One thing is clear," the governor says, "this type of behavior is unacceptable and I will not tolerate it because the people of New Jersey deserve better. This behavior," the governor goes on, "is not representative of me or my administration in any way, and people will be held responsible for their action." And that statement released by the governor's office late this afternoon. All this coming after the Democrats spent hours today taking aim at the governor and his staff. Our chief political correspondent, Michael Aaron, picks up that part of the story.
The governor's office was silent all day until it put out a late afternoon statement. The man who has spearheaded the legislative Democrats' probe into what's become known as Bridgegate called a news conference earlier that attracted a crowd.
What we've seen today is a sad day for New Jersey. The documents that have been published are both shocking and outrageous. They show government at its worst. Among other things, they call into serious question the honesty of this governor and his staff.
The link between David Wildstein and Christie's Deputy Chief of Staff, Bridget Kelly, brings the scandal into the governor's office for the first time. The first question to Lesniak was, did Christie know about any of this?
I've not seen any emails that have the governor's name on it, but clearly there's an email that has the governor's Deputy Chief of Staff on it. This is an administration that keeps a very tight control over what happens and what comes out of the front office. And so we'd like to get explanations as to who else in the governor's office knew about this and what their role was.
Wildstein has been subpoenaed to testify tomorrow before Lesniak's committee. His attorney, Alan Zegas, moved to quash that subpoena today by requesting an order to show cause. Christie has said he canvassed his staff and no one claimed knowledge of the George Washington Bridge lane closures.
And I've made it very clear to everybody on my senior staff that if anyone had any knowledge about this, that they needed to come forward to me and tell me about it, and they've all assured me that they don't. Oh yeah, I've spoken to Mr. Stepien, who's the person in charge of the campaign, and he has assured me the same thing.
Lesniak was asked how that squares with what's in the documents.
Well, there's 2 possibilities. I mean, either he doesn't know what's going on in his front office, or that there's lying going on.
Democrat Loretta Weinberg said the documents are shocking to her.
The biggest problem is that the governor has created an atmosphere at the Port Authority that enabled people like David Wildstein to believe that he could just do this, and then enabled people like Bill Baroni, with whom I served in the state Senate, to come forth with a made-up cover-up.
Christie initially laughed off the episode.
Yeah, I worked the cones, actually, Matt. Unbeknownst to everybody, I was actually the guy out there. I was in overalls and a hat, so I wasn't, but I actually was the guy working the cones out there. You really are not serious with that question.
Lesniak says tying up traffic for days to get back at a mayor is no laughing matter.
And when you see the words that somebody was worried about the children being late for school, and then the response is, well, don't worry about it, they're probably children of Bono voters. I mean, that's not what you expect to see in any Port Authority operation, any government operation.
Lesniak says his investigation will continue, and there were calls today from Democrats for a criminal investigation. At the State House, I'm Michael Aaron, NJTV News.
Michael Aaron is standing by live for us at the State House right now. Michael, I can't really, I guess, go into the kind of depth and detail on this that you can. With all the years you've covered the news breaking inside that building, with all the hearings you've covered, with all the governors you've known, have you ever seen anything quite like this?
Well, I've seen plenty, Mike, and I've seen scandal. I've seen serious resignations of governors and U.S. senators. But this was a big day down here. I think this is the biggest crisis that the Christie administration has faced so far, and they're in contain the damage mode right now, very much so.
Are you surprised that it took as long as it did for the governor's office to come out with a statement on his behalf? There were many people we've made a lot of calls. You made a lot of efforts to get comment from them earlier in the day. Why did it take them until somewhere around 5 o'clock this afternoon to put out a statement?
Two things on that. One, I heard that they were hunkered down all day. I'm not sure whether it was here at the State House or at Drumthwacket or up at the governor's home, but they were taken by surprise by this as well. And I think what signals that, and I've got some feedback in my ear, I'm sorry about that, but if there's any way of fixing that. But they were surprised by this because just yesterday, it was announced that the governor has chosen Bill Stepien to be the new Republican state chairman. Had they known that Stepien's name was going to be in a document that was going to come out either today or at a hearing tomorrow, they probably wouldn't have done that. So I feel as if they were taken by surprise, and it took them that long to come up with a response. There was some thought that maybe the governor should hold a news conference and drown out John Lesniak's news conference, or at least compete with it. But as you point out, that didn't happen.
You also have, in addition to Stepien, you have a deputy chief of staff who we've got pictures of the governor celebrating her birthday, it appears. I mean, this is somebody who's worked for him for a while, who seems rather close to him. What kind of role did she have in the Christie administration? And is she the one who's likely to walk the plank here?
Well, it was interesting that in his statement that you read, he did not ask for her resignation or announce her resignation, although he did say those who did engage in this conduct will be held responsible. One imagines she's going to have to take a fall on this. But she is a trusted, valued member of the team. She's not in the very senior staff. She's one level down. There are about 3 or 4 senior staff people. There are 3 or 4 deputy chiefs of staff. And her role has grown in the Christie administration. She first dealt with relations between the governor's office and the legislature. And then not long ago, she was moved over to relations between the governor's office and local officials, like mayors, like the mayor of Fort Lee. At the same time, I heard some top Republicans today suggesting that she was not powerful enough to order a lane closure like this, that somebody else, either in the campaign or in the governor's office, had to have been part of the initiation of this. And one thing intriguing in the documents is that Bridget Kelly's email to David Wildstein was on August 13th saying it's time to slow down the traffic in Fort Lee. On August the 8th, Governor Christie met with David Sampson, the chairman of the Port Authority, his chairman, and someone whom he's very close. Somebody is going to shine a light on that meeting and find out what they talked about. I'm not implying that they talked about Fort Lee, but there's a 5-day gap between a meeting between the two potentates and this email from a deputy chief of staff to Wildstein saying time to slow down the traffic in Fort Lee.
All right, Michael, thank you very much. Michael's going to hang around for us a couple of moments because we will have more questions for him as well. But among those asking questions tonight is the former governor, Tom Kean, widely considered to be the mentor of Governor Christie. He's on the phone right now. Governor, I've heard it, I've seen some quotes attributed to you saying that you'd like to see a special investigation, that you don't know enough about this situation and you want to know more. Is that true, sir?
Well, I don't think any of us know enough at this point. We got those emails, we got some statements, but the whole thing is crazy. I mean, you don't. If you wrote this in a novel, you wouldn't believe it. And so I think there's got to be. What worries me is, I know there's going to be an investigation. I have respect for the legislators involved, except so far it's all been partisan. You have the former chairman of the Democratic State Committee doing the investigating, and there hasn't been a Republican committee member in sight. And I'm told that they haven't had access to all the documents. So if you're really going to have an investigation that's credible, then you better make it bipartisan.
There
We're going to have problems.
were those, sir, who also say that this should be taken up to the federal level. The Port Authority, obviously created by an act of Congress. Do you think that that Congress should, in fact, conduct an investigation here?
No, I think we're perfectly capable of doing that in New Jersey, but I do think in order to get the credibility, you've got to have both parties involved in a bipartisan committee and a bipartisan investigation. And best of my knowledge, you have not had that yet at this point.
I ask this question with respect, sir, but I have to ask it. There are those who wonder whether some of the comments you're making or criticism implicit you might have right now might be tied into the fact that Governor Christie backed Senator O'Toole against your son for the majority or Republican leadership post in the Senate. I just want to get you on the record regarding that, sir.
No, and I don't think I've made any critical comments anyway. What I've said is there should be an investigation. There's already an investigation. What I'm suggesting is it should be bipartisan.
Do you think that, well, first of all, at this, were you governor right now, and were staff members accused of doing what they're accused of doing here, or what the emails apparently indicate they have done here, would you have fired them on the spot and named names?
Well, the first thing you got to do is recognize what's going on. Mike Aaron suggested that perhaps the governor was caught by surprise by this. Well, if he was, then you got to find out right away what the facts are, and you've got to get them all out there. The worst thing you can do is let facts like this drag out day by day. So I would hope that the governor is now doing an internal investigation, that he'll find out all the facts, and all those facts will be public, I hope, tomorrow.
What do you think this says about the way that Chris Christie governs?
Well, I don't know what it says about him, so we don't know the facts. I mean, if we got the emails, we've got the statements by the Democrats on the committee. We haven't got an awful lot more. And I think before we come to any fine conclusion, the governor says he doesn't know anything about it. I've known the governor for a long, long time. I'll tell you this. He's always told me the truth. You can agree or disagree, but this is a guy who tells the truth. So when he says he doesn't know anything about it, I believe him.
But even if he's telling the truth, sir, there are those who say then perhaps he's chosen unwisely in terms of the people that he surrounded himself with. So I ask you this, is the governor, even if he turns out to be telling the truth, is he politically damaged as a result of this?
I think the amount of, yes, there's some political damage, and the amount of political damage is going to depend on the rest of the investigation. I mean, we've got to, what comes out, what happened, how it happened, who was involved, was anybody involved who's even closer to Christie than the ones who are mentioned right now? We don't know any of that, and until, and my suggestion again is the governor get every fact out there, and when the investigation is done, we'll be able to make our own conclusions. But until then, it's very hard to jump to conclusions.
Governor Kean, we'll leave it there, sir. Thank you very much for being on the program, sir.
Thank you.
So what does this mean for a governor with vast political ambitions by all accounts? Joining us now is the director of the Monmouth University poll, Patrick Murray, and Senator Ray Lesniak, who does believe that it's time for federal investigators to get involved. I have heard it said. Why?
Well, first of all, there's some obvious criminal violations here. Malfeasance in office, using government authority to not only inconvenience thousands of people, but put safety at risk, emergency vehicles, prevent school children from getting to school on time. And it's right there on the record. We have the facts. There's reasonable suspicion that there are criminal violations here. The cover-up was political, for sure. This phony traffic study story tale that was spun by former Senator Barone and Weidelstein. That's a political issue.
Are you accusing the governor of being involved in a cover-up, sir?
I don't know whether he was involved in the cover-up. I don't know. What I do know is that there are a lot of redacted names on these emails that we have to get to the bottom of.
Who, under what authority? I mean, you're an attorney,
sure,
and you're a senator.
Yep.
Who gets to decide what's redacted when emails are issued, when texts are issued? Because a lot of what we got today was redacted.
Ultimately, the courts will decide. There'll be an effort made to...
But somebody was crossing these things out. Who was it, and what gave them the sense they could do it?
Well, exactly. And that's what we'll have to find out. And by the way, that's what a grand jury should find out. Because there is certainly reasonable suspicion that this government authority was used to hurt people, to inconvenience them and to endanger them. That is a criminal violation that has to be pursued.
Patrick, you've been writing about this today. What's your overall impression of what we've learned?
Well, at the end of the day, the public impression of Chris Christie is somebody who's a straight talker and says what he wants and is willing to butt heads to get what he wants. And actually people, whether they agree with him or disagree with him, see that that's part of the package. And even if they disagree with it, they say, hey, that's what he's done to get things done. So the fact that he may have used, or somebody may have used on his behalf, something to get some political retribution in the midst of a political campaign is probably not going to hurt him immediately. The real question about the political impact on him is whether this was a concerted effort, whether there was an ongoing operation within his administration to go after political enemies.
On that subject, hold it right there, because we do have a clip of the governor addressing the entire concept of accountability and responsibility on this subject. Let's roll that right now.
I didn't know anything about it, but I'm responsible. For every person who acts in this government, I am ultimately responsible. If you want to hear me say that, I'm happy to say it because it's true. I'm ultimately responsible for every person that I put in this government and the actions they take. That's different, obviously, than direct responsibility, but ultimate responsibility, sure.
So what do we make of what that says about him and his governing style?
So this is the other part of his style, which is I'm in charge. And nothing happens without me knowing what's going to happen. So now he's just issued a statement which said something happened without me knowing what's going to happen. So if we take that statement at face value, it undermines the credibility of the image that he's been trying to project. So that could have an impact down the line, particularly if more things come out. I think if it ends at the George Washington Bridge issue, the Fort Lee issue, I think he can live this out. But if more things start coming out, other people, and there's so many names that are involved in this, that this could lead to longer investigations on other issues.
One of the things that I guess shocked people the most about what they read was the part of it was redacted, involving the voters and the motorists of the Fort Lee area not being able to get through, and Wildstein saying to somebody who we don't know who precisely, because it was redacted, don't worry about them. Essentially, they're the children of WONO voters, these kids whose school buses are being delayed, and we have reports of first responders, ambulances, and police vehicles also being delayed, with sometimes, perhaps, according to some reports, fatal consequences.
Well, understand this. Governor Christie has addressed national Republican leaders in the past and has said, we have to do whatever it takes to win. Some people obviously took that seriously. Some people very close to him, some people in a position to hurt people in order to gain political advantage. So this is an important investigation that has to be pursued at all levels.
Do you think that what you're saying then is that he's speaking code to his followers? What
I'm saying is he has hired people and he's sent the message that if you cross me, I'm going to get back at you. And that he's done over and over and over again. This time people took it way too far, and somebody's going to have to pay the price for that.
Patrick, you know the people who work for this governor. Yeah. Are they the kind of people likely to be taking things way too far?
They're the kind of people who feel that their first responsibility is to protect Governor Christie. This is why I saw the appointment of Bill Stepien. I know a lot of Republicans came out and said, oh, they see this as a good thing. He's going to help local people. I saw that as Bill Stepien stepping in and being put there to make sure that the Republicans in New Jersey don't start going off the ranch while the governor is gearing up for a presidential run.
And on that subject, we have another clip in which the governor virtually assures everybody that nobody on his campaign could be or would be involved in this. Let's roll that clip right now.
I've made it very clear to everybody on my senior staff that if anyone had any knowledge about this, that they needed to come forward to me and tell me about it, and they've all assured me that they don't. Oh yeah, I've spoken to Mr. Stepien, who's the person in charge of the campaign, and he has assured me the same thing.
So I guess we come back to this then. Is it possible not only did the governor not know, but Mr. Stepien, whose name surfaces frequently in the email chains and the text chains as well, that he didn't know?
Yeah, well, remember, Stepien's name, as far as we know from the stuff that's come out so far, Stepien's name comes up late, after the actual closure, as an issue of, oh, now that the Foy memo came out, the Foy email where he says that maybe this was abusive and I'm shutting this down, that Wildstein is saying to Stepien, hey, I'm sorry for causing a problem, and that's going back and forth. So the governor, in his statement, and the governor is extremely good at parsing his words. He said if anybody knew about the closure in my staff come forward. Now, Stepien may not have known about the closure when it happened. What did he know afterwards is the question. And this gets back to the whole question with Governor Christie and the whole Nixon question. This is what Governor Christie does not want this thing, is what did the governor know?
You're bringing Nixon into
and
this.
when did he know it?
Yeah.
And that's the question that's being asked across the nation. It's being asked by Republican donors, by the Republican Party leaders across the country, as well as Democrats, because the Republicans across the country are worried this is the guy that we're getting behind as our savior for 2016, who's going to win back the White House. And we've already heard things about him not coming clean when he was being vetted for vice president. Are there other things in his closet? And these are the discussions that Chris Christie doesn't want to have happening. And they're going to happen, and they're going to continue to happen, at least for the next few weeks.
Back to the State House right now, Michael Aaron. Michael, you've been hearing some of the clips that we've been playing. You were there for most of them, in fact, the conversation as well. Give me a sense of where this goes tomorrow.
Well, tomorrow in the morning, there is a court hearing here in Trenton where David Wildstein's attorney, Alan Zegas, who's one of the most prominent defense lawyers in the state, is going to try to quash the subpoena to prevent David Wildstein, his client, from appearing at noon at the hearing that John Wisniewski has called. So that's the immediate drama for tomorrow. But this is bigger. There's a presidential aspiration wrapped up in this scandal, as Patrick and Ray Lesniak have just discussed. And I don't know where it goes from here, but it's not done yet. And the national media is taking note of this. John Wisniewski is on MSNBC tonight, as is Barbara Buono. CNN carried Wisniewski's news conference live this afternoon nationwide. So it's not over. I thought it was over 2-3 weeks ago. It's not over.
Yeah, Gordon Johnson, Assemblyman Johnson, was on MSNBC just before we came on as well. You've got some media appearances scheduled, I understand, as well. I have to ask you this question: Are you and your fellow Democrats doing a celebratory dance here? Are you happy that your greatest political nemesis is, at least for the moment, on the defensive?
Not happy, but grateful that the chickens have come home to roost, that this governor, who has taken no prisoners, who has said it's my way or the highway, who will do anything what it takes to win, is finally being called into question, as he should be. And that we're able to ultimately find out not only the actions that were taken for political retribution, but what about the cover-up? What about this phony traffic study story? That had to be plotted out and planned. There's a lot here that still has to come out.
Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be fascinating because of it being tied into the whole presidential aspirations. As I said, if it weren't for the presidential aspirations, this whole thing would have never happened. Nobody would have cared whether the mayor of Fort Lee had endorsed him or not. It was the idea that they needed 100% cooperation, that they weren't going to settle for anything less, and anything less was they're going to take retaliation against. And that's what happens when you start being able to taste the White House. You start making mistakes. And so we don't know how many people made mistakes, but there were quite a few right now. And so how far and how high up does this go is a question that we have to ask. And certainly that's why this story is going to play out over the next few weeks, if not longer.
And that's why tomorrow, on the air at about noon, we have Assemblyman Wisniewski, Chairman Wisniewski will be holding his hearing. David Wildstein has been subpoenaed to testify. He is the #2 appointee from Governor Christie at the Port Authority. It was until he resigned. The man who has taken responsibility for ordering those sudden lane closures. He has been subpoenaed to testify. He's gone to court to try to quash that subpoena. Tomorrow morning we'll find out whether or not that is successful. And if it's not, then we will see whether or not he shows at the State House and whether he testifies and gives anything more than perhaps, as some suspect, the Fifth Amendment. Back with more for you tomorrow. For now, I'm Mike Schneider. Thank you for watching, and good night.